Welcome to EEN and YECA Summer of Action. Today we're having our writing and social media workshop, and we're really excited to have you here. My name is Marcus Cole, the Director of Church and Community Engagement. And whether you're here with us live today or you're watching the recording later, we're just really excited to be with you this summer for this very special moment. As some of you know, last week, we kicked off our Summer of Action where we had our president and CEO, Mitch, and Jessica come and share about policymaker meetings and about why this moment is so special to share our values as evangelicals and Christians. But we didn't want to just leave you with that kickoff. We wanted to come back. And so today, I'm going to be joined by my friend Kyle and Grace momentarily to talk about how we can go just beyond meeting with policymakers, but really sharing our values through writing and through social media to impact and influence others. Before we get to that, though, I do just want to set the agenda and the table really quickly and then offer a word of prayer, and then I'll throw to my friend Kyle. So just as a housekeeping reminder, we are going to ask that you stay on mute during the presentation. At various points, Kyle and Grace will interact with us. They'll ask us to put things in the chat box or maybe even share a little bit, especially at the end. We've reserved time to have some of that more open discussion. So there will be a chance to interact. But during the course of the presentation, I would ask that you stay on mute. Also, just as a reminder, we will be sending out this presentation later on via email. It'll live in digital form so people can access, as well as handouts. So if there's something that you missed, don't worry. We're going to be sending it to you with handouts and leave behind. So that'll be coming as well. So given that, I will just go ahead and open us in a word of prayer. If you'll turn, bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time together as brothers and sisters in Christ and as co-heirs. And we just bless you for being that your spirit be with us to encourage us and give us wisdom and discernment. But also, Lord, that we don't just be hearers of the message, but we be doers of the message, that we not simply deceive ourselves that intellectual assent to your word is all that there is. That we really do ask that we be hearers of a message, that we be doers of a message, and that we go and do what is pure and undefiled religion in your sight, which is to look after the orphans and the widows in their affliction, and to keep ourselves with the sustained on your word, Lord. And so we ask that you be with us in that, and we be with Kyle and with Grace as we hear about how to be followers of Jesus and to advance your kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. We do all this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So Kyle, I'd love to invite you off of mute to share with us a little bit about advocacy writing and how we can be a part, how our voices can be a part of this very special moment we're in.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marcus. And thanks to all of you for being on today. I'm really excited to spend some time sharing about writing as advocacy. It's something I'm passionate about personally and really passionate about helping other people catch a vision for and be equipped for. So I'm really eager for the next few minutes together to chat about that. But I want to start our time today with this question. Why? Why take the time, and it will take time, to write an opinion piece or a letter to the editor? Why take the time to pitch it around to editors and get rejected until it finally gets placed? Why do all of that? And I want to help us answer that question by inviting you to think about a piece that you've read, maybe recently when it's still top of mind, maybe a while ago when it stuck with you, but something that you've read that moved you, that influenced you, that changed the way you think about something. And I want you to just take a couple of moments to reflect on that. And if you have an example, to either put it in the chat, or, I'm actually going to contradict my friend Marcus right away and invite you, if you want to take yourself off mute and just share a couple of sentences about a piece, if you can think of one. So go ahead and chat that in if you have an example. When was the time that you read a piece that touched you, that moved you, that changed the way you see an issue or think about a topic? Marcus, a recent Pulitzer Prize winning article about the death of Ahmaud Arbery in Runner's World. That's great. Pulitzer Prize piece from Runner's World. Yeah, that sounds powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Any other examples of a piece that you've read that's moved you or changed the way you think or see a topic? Grace, New York Times published something about languishing in the pandemic. I read that same piece and I think about that often. Yeah, languishing is the space between flourishing and depression, and how so many of us have lived there during the pandemic. That's great. Well, I think all of us probably have examples of pieces that we've encountered that have moved us and shaped us. And the reason we do the work of writing for advocacy, of writing op-eds and LTEs, is because they have that power. Our words have the power to move people, to shape hearts, to change the way that people see a topic or an issue, and to shape the public conversation around topics and issues. We have the power to be public voices and to shape the public conversation. I want to share one example of what that looks like. In 2017, Scott Pruitt was the nominee to head the Environmental Protection Agency. At the time, he was the Attorney General at Oklahoma, and his record on the environment made it eminently clear that he was manifestly unqualified for the position. So EEN and Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, where I was at the time, took a position against his nomination. And I decided to write an opinion piece to that effect. I wrote it and submitted it to Sojourners, a Christian publication, online magazine, as well as print, but a lot of their content's online now, titled, "Will Scott Pruitt Live Out His Faith in the EPA?" And that was published, and somehow a Senate staffer found that article. They read it, they thought it was good, they took an excerpt of it and blew it up on a big board, and their boss, Senator Tom Carper from Delaware, who you see there, read it on the floor of the Senate during his floor speech opposing the nomination of Scott Pruitt. So my words and the message of EEN and YECA were read on the Senate floor that day. They live in the Library of Congress, and we helped shape that conversation. I wish it had had a different outcome. Scott Pruitt went on to be the EPA administrator, to be confirmed. However, our message got out there because we had decided to publish a piece, and that was one way that piece and those words influenced the public conversation. So I hope you understand that we're not just writing and putting it out into the void, but our words matter and they have power. So I want to talk really quickly about two forms of writing for advocacy: the letter to the editor and the op-ed. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about op-eds today, but first, just a few words on letters to the editor. And before that, the difference between them. So a letter to the editor is a shorter piece than an op-ed. It's usually about 250 words, give or take. It's a good idea before you write one to check with the paper that you want to pitch to, because they'll usually have their guidelines on their website. A letter to the editor is usually doing one of two things. It's either responding to another article that was previously published, or it is making a pithy argument about a current event. I'm going to show you an example of each of those in a minute. The letter to the editor page tends to be one of the most read pages in at least print publications, and I think online is similar too. People want to hear what their neighbors have to say. They want to hear what fellow readers have to say. And because they're short pieces, they're easily digestible. So people don't have to commit to reading a long news piece, just a 200-word argument from a reader. And these tend to be easier to get published because a publication will publish multiple letters to the editor in a given day. So there's more room for that. An op-ed is a little different. An op-ed is an argument-driven opinion piece that's longer. It tends to be about 650 to 800 words. And again, it's a good idea to check with your paper. I'll give you a resource to help you do that at the end. And it takes kind of a new, interesting, or unexpected angle on a topic. And it's an argument that you, the writer, are making. And while it is usually pegged to current events or to the news, which I'll talk about in a moment, it should also have a bit of a shelf life. Your general argument, not just the news hook that you're using to make it relevant, but the argument you're making should hold up over time, at least a couple of weeks, a month or more. And these do tend to be a little more challenging to get placed, but I think their influence tends to be greater because they are less timely. They are less pegged to a specific article, like a letter to the editor. It's an argument that holds up over time, so it can live longer. So here are a couple of examples of what a letter to the editor looks like. And this is kind of a classic response to an article that was published previously. So that the Boston Globe published a piece on young evangelicals for climate action in 2019, specifically about one of our steering committee members, Lindsay Mao, and another steering committee member of ours from Boston, Christine Seibert, decided she wanted to write a letter to the editor in response to that article. So you can see right at the beginning there, regarding among evangelicals, a schism for the ages, page A1, December 28. Each paper will have guidelines about how to reference an article if your letter to the editor is in response to a previously published article. So that's how she figured out she needed to format it that way. But then she gets into her argument. She establishes who she is. I'm a young evangelical too, just like Lindsay, who was featured in the piece. And then she wanted to address something from the article. She specifically wanted to disagree with an argument that the author had made in the piece, that young evangelicals were being forced with a choice of either identifying with their generational cohort when it comes to climate change or their faith community, which was increasingly out of step on climate change. And Christine wanted to complexify that and say, no, that's actually a false choice because I'm a young Christian who is motivated by my faith community to do this work. So that was her response to that article that was published previously. That's one example of what a letter to the editor can look like. Another example is it can be about a current event, something that's happening right now, something that's newsworthy. This is a letter to the editor that was published by an EEN champion on the 15th anniversary of Endangered Species Day, which marks the Endangered Species Act. So Endangered Species Day was happening, and this champion wrote a letter to the editor at the Cleveland Plain Dealer in Cleveland, Ohio, and it got published. And she showed right at the top why it was relevant. Friday, May 15th is the 15th annual Endangered Species Day, and this is why that matters. And then she made it local, especially if you're writing a letter to the editor to a local paper. An editor is always asking the question, why does this matter to my local readers? So be sure to make it local. And she did. She talked about how here, right there in Ohio, they had 30 species that were listed as threatened or endangered under the Endangered Species Act. So it mattered to Ohioans, to Buckeyes. And then she added some scripture to further her faith. She talked about Genesis 1 and our invitation or command to have dominion and to be responsible for God's creatures. So it's, and then she had an invitation at the end. She urged her elected leaders in DC to protect God's most at-risk creatures by defending the Endangered Species Act. That's kind of a classic letter to the editor that's not responding to a previously published article, but is making a short argument about something that's newsy, something that's current. I want to spend most of our time today, though, talking about op-eds. And before we pivot to op-eds, I just want to say if that's of interest to you, if you want to write a letter to the editor, we are eager to help you do that. And I'm gonna share how you can get in touch with us at the end of the time here today. And now I want to shift to talking about op-eds. And I want to start by asking, does anybody know what OpEd stands for. You can chat this, you can come off mute. Caven, opinion editorial. Yeah, so there is actually some dispute about whether or not it refers to opinion editorial or if it means opposite the editorial page. So when newspapers were mostly print or all print, they would have a section that was an editorial piece that was written by the editorial staff of a newspaper. These were writers that were paid by the newspaper to write opinion pieces. That would be on the editorial page. And opposite that page would be guest opinion pieces sent in by writers that editors selected. So it can mean either opposite the editorial page or opinion editorial. Either way, it is an argument-driven opinion piece submitted by a reader to a newspaper or a publication. And just like any kind of literature, op-eds are a genre, and they have particular set pieces that I want to make you aware of to help you write them as effectively as possible. So right at the outset, I want to say I'm not offering you a formula right now. I'm going to offer you a framework. I want to introduce you to some of the pieces of an op-ed so that as you think about and begin writing op-eds, you know what pieces an editor is looking for as they read your pieces. So first is the lead. Now, this is kind of some journalistic jargon, but the lead is essentially just your attention grabbing opening. It's usually 1 to 3 sentences, maybe 4, but you usually want to keep it short, and it tends to be centered around a news hook, something current, something in the news that makes your piece timely. It doesn't have to be, and we're going to talk about leads in more depth in just a minute. But right now, I just want you to understand that the lead is your opening. It's your introduction, the way that you grab your reader's attention. Another important piece of an op-ed is your thesis. What argument are you actually making? If an op-ed is an argument-driven opinion piece, you need to have an argument that you're making. And in an op-ed, this can actually be explicit or implicit. Unlike a book or an essay, you don't need a thesis statement. It doesn't have to be explicit, but it should be clear to the reader that you are making a particular point and what that particular point is. And then you want to make sure that you're supporting that argument with evidence. This needs to be evidence-based, and that evidence can take lots of different forms. It can be statistics, it can be news reports, it can be reports or studies from credible organizations, it can be expert quotes, it can be other scholarship, it can be history, firsthand experience. Your own experience can be used as evidence in an op-ed. But you want to make sure that you're supporting the argument you're making with evidence. And you also want to make sure that your op-ed includes some to be sures. Anybody have any idea what a to be sure might be? Feel free to drop it in the chat or come off mute. What do you think a to be sure is, or what do you think that means? Qualifications. Yeah, thanks, Kaven. Yes, so a to be sure is in anticipation of a potential counter argument to your argument. A to be sure is you showing that you've thought deeply and thoughtfully and that you are reasonable and that you recognize that no argument is perfect, including yours, and that you've done the work of anticipating some counter arguments and you have offered some responses to those. An editor especially is looking for these because it shows that you're thoughtful, that you've done your homework, that you're reasonable, and it's going to give you a lot of credibility with your reader, especially if a reader doesn't fully buy your argument. You're going to lose a reader because they're going to be perseverating on their to be sure in their own head, their own counter argument as they read. And if they see you acknowledging that counter argument that's in their head, they're going to say, oh, wow, okay, so they recognize that. That's great. And they're going to be a lot more open to your argument after that. So you want to include to be sures, at least one to be sure in every single op-ed you write. And then finally, you just want to wrap it up with a conclusion. Sometimes that can loop back to the lead and kind of bookmark your piece by pulling in the lead again at the end. It could be an ask, like that letter to the editor we looked at. I urge my members of Congress to support the Endangered Species Act. It could be a specific ask like that, but you want to land the plane with a conclusion to your op-ed. So again, this is not a formula. And the order actually doesn't matter. I'm going to show you some examples about how the order gets mixed up and moved around. But these are just some of the pieces you want to consider as you go about writing your op-ed. So what does this look like in practice? This is the opening couple of paragraphs from a piece that I had published in Grist last year, September. And I want to show you the lead and the newshook in this piece, the thesis, and a to be sure. So right away is my lead, right? This is my introduction, the way I'm grabbing the attention of my reader. Before the coronavirus and economic recession took up all the oxygen, 2020 was shaping up to become the climate election. I don't know if you remember that, but climate was getting a lot of play over the summer. And with hurricane season and the wildfires out west, climate change again was kind of front and center after the coronavirus and the economics began to recede after the summer kind of dip in cases. So that was my news hook. At the time, hurricanes were taking on Greek letters because they'd exhausted all of the other letters in the alphabet. And that was my kind of tie to current events. And then my thesis. If climate change does end up defining this election, one unlikely group of voters may decide its outcome: young evangelicals. So my piece went on to make the case for why I thought that was true. And then right after that, you'll notice I included to be sure, because I anticipated a counter argument immediately to my thesis, which is that evangelicals historically are some of the most skeptical of the science and most resistant to solutions. So I named that. I said, absolutely, that's the case. And my response is that's not necessarily the case among younger evangelicals. So again, you can see here that a to be sure can be right at the top. It doesn't have to be at the bottom like it was in that framework I shared with you. The thesis doesn't have to be right here, but it is in this case. But there are lots of ways you can play around with that framework, but you want to include those pieces in any piece that you write. Sorry, I'm terrible at checking the chat. Okay, Marcus, yeah, while I'm presenting, so apologies for that. So let's talk for just a couple minutes about that lead again. And again, just a reminder, the lead grabs your reader's attention. It is your introduction. It's the very first words of your piece. And it's often tied to a news hook. And a news hook serves the function of tying your idea to the zeitgeist, to what's happening in culture right now, and it makes your piece timely. Almost every editor you're going to pitch to is going to ask, why now? Why does this piece need to be published right now? What makes this newsworthy at this moment? So you want to make sure, even if your lead doesn't have a news hook in it, you want to make sure to have some sort of news hook in your piece that connects your argument to the current moment. A nice illustration that I like to think of when it comes to your argument and your news hook is the argument you're trying to make, your big idea that you're trying to write about in your op-ed is a ship, then news hooks are ports. And there are multiple ports. It's not like you miss a news hook and your idea is scrapped, right? Your big idea can be tied to lots of different news hooks. It can find lots of different ports, and it takes practice to find those ports. But there are a lot of creative ways to do it. One example that I love is there was a piece written a few years ago by an American geologist talking about how the American K through 12 educational system needs to do a better job of teaching earth science and geology. And the news hook she used was the royal wedding between William and Kate. And the way she did that was talking about how walking through the supermarket, every single magazine cover she sees is splashed with Kate's diamond ring. But if the stone in her ring was anything but a diamond, Americans would have a hard time naming it. And that's why the American education system needs to do a better job of teaching geology and earth science. And there she was, off and running with her argument, having captured the reader's attention in a creative and unexpected way. So that was the port that she used to park her big idea. But some of the ways that you can structure your lead, your introduction. Yes, Caben, absolutely. You're going to be getting a handout in the follow-up email to this presentation, so no worries. Some of the ways that you can structure a lead or create a lead, that introduction that you're writing, is to use the news, like we talked about, that news hook. You can also tell a dramatic anecdote, either a personal anecdote or a story in the public domain that's powerful, that will grab people's attention. You can reference pop culture. What are the TikTok trends? What's happening with K-pop? I don't know. I'm not plugged into pop culture, but if you are, use it. That can be a great way to grab readers' attention. You can turn conventional wisdom on end. And actually, as evangelical Christians engaged in climate change and environmental protection, we kind of have a baked-in way to do that in our very identity. Because not a lot of people expect evangelical Christians to be engaged in this. So even using your own story to turn conventional wisdom on end could be a powerful way to write your lead and grab your reader's attention. Other ways to write a lead is to use an anniversary. There are almost always big anniversaries coming up. The 50th, the 75th, the 100th anniversary of something can be used as a lead, an attention grabber. Use a holiday or a season. August is coming. That means pumpkin spice latte season is going to be upon us again. Use that maybe, or an actual holiday or season. There's always major studies coming out. You can cite that, or you can get personal and share a little bit of your own story. Here's what that can look like. This is a piece that CNN published in April that I wrote. And my lead was personal. I got personal. I shared a personal story about my son's 3rd birthday. He had just celebrated it that month. And I shared about how that day affected me and how all of that had me thinking about climate change. So that was my lead, sharing that personal anecdote to grab my reader's attention. And then you can see my lead wasn't necessarily tied to a news hook. There's no news hook in those first couple sentences, but my news hook comes after, when I talk about Joe Biden making the American Jobs Plan the centerpiece of his legacy and the centerpiece of his climate plan. And then my thesis followed that. The fact that Joe Biden talking about the American Jobs Plan probably meant climate change was going to be on the top of mind for millions of Americans was great news, but it gave me pause. And then I went on to say why in the rest of my piece. So that's an example of how a lead can look different. How you can use your own personal stories or who you are as a person to the piece. And actually editors tend to really like that because it brings a human element into the piece that really grabs readers' attention. So I want to talk about one more piece of that framework, that thesis. So we are trying to make an argument here, right? So what kind of arguments are we trying to make? Well, for the Summer of Action specifically, we have some suggestions for you. But as I say at the end of this slide, if you have other suggestions, let's talk. We don't want to circumscribe your ideas. We want to give you some possibilities, but we also want you to run with ideas that you might have. So some possibilities for a thesis that you can write about this summer as part of the Summer of Action is a challenge to your elected officials to listen to what Christians are saying and to enact positive climate legislation, to make sure that any infrastructure plan that passes or any climate plans that pass reflect Christian values of justice, care for the oppressed and the marginalized, of protecting God's creation. You could also, your argument could be a call to your fellow Christians to hold elected officials accountable for bold climate action. Make the case for why other Christians should care about this, and invite them to join with you. Or it could just be a general argument for how Christians are taking climate change seriously and are taking action. Maybe your audience isn't going to be elected officials or fellow Christians, but just a general audience. And you want to make the case that contrary to popular belief, Christians do care about this, and we are engaged in this, and this is what we're doing. And again, if you have other ideas, that's great. Let's talk. Okay, I want to say just a few words about pitching your op-ed before I hand it over to Grace. Because you can write a beautiful op-ed, but it's only going to have impact if an editor reads it and decides to publish it. So how do you pitch your piece once it's finished? Well, one thing you should do is choose your outlet and research how to send in your piece. One great resource I'm going to offer you, and this will be in the handout resource that'll come to you via email soon, is the OpEd project submission information webpage. They have hundreds of newspapers from across the US that you can click on and get submission guidelines from right there. How many words that paper wants in their op-eds, how to submit it. That's a great resource for you. When you're crafting your pitch, I want you to think about 3 pieces. Your pitch should include 3 buckets. Why me? Why am I the best one to write this piece? Why now? Why is this newsworthy at this moment? We talked about that. And so what? Why are people going to care when they read this piece? An editor is asking themselves these questions when they get pitches. Why is this author the right one to be making this argument? Why is now the right time to make it? And why are readers of my publication going to care about it? So you want to give the editor those reasons in your pitch. It's also a good idea to include the argument you're making in the first sentence or 2. And to do all of this in about 150 words or fewer. Crafting a pitch can be hard work. It should take practice. But it's really, really important because it can be the foot in the doorway to getting your piece published if you write a really good pitch. And a good general rule of thumb, unless you see otherwise from the publication, is to copy and paste your piece directly into the body of the email right after your pitch, and to not include attachments. After you send your pitch, it's a good idea to follow up because editors are busy and sometimes they need reminders. Don't be annoying, but a good rule of thumb is you can follow up 2 times, 2 or 3 days apart. Give an editor a couple days to respond, ping them and say, hey, does this look like something you can use? Just to put it at the top of their inbox. Give them a couple more days, follow up and say, hey, I'm hoping to get this placed somewhere else. So if you are interested, let me know in the next couple of days. Otherwise, I'll move on. And if you don't hear, you can move on to another publication. It's also a very good idea to only pitch to 1 publication at a time because it's very, very embarrassing. And it's a great way to burn a bridge with an editor if they accept your piece and then have to go back to them and say, oh, actually, it was already accepted by this other publication. You don't want to do that. So pitch to 1 at a time and expect rejection. Rejection is a feature of this process. It's not a bug. You will get rejected by editors. That's okay. I know I'm running out of time. So this is just an example of what a pitch email can look like. A clear subject with a possible headline as the subject of the email. And then you see I have why me in that first paragraph. Here's who I am. And my thesis, my op-ed about the absence of joy in the climate movement and how it's crucial for success. And then I have my why now, because Biden's infrastructure plan is a top issue. And so what, because we can only be successful if climate action moves from feeling like guilt-induced obligation to joy-filled freedom. So that's my why now, my thesis, why me, so what, and then the pitch is there below those dotted lines, copied and pasted. All right, so that was a lot of info. Again, you're going to be getting a handout with a lot of that. And this is our contact information. We're going to say this a couple times today, but please, don't feel like you're bothering us by reaching out. It is our job to connect with you and to help you birth these pieces into existence. And it is our joy to connect with you about that. So if you have any questions along the way, if you want us to read drafts, if you want us to help read through a pitch before you send it, all of that we want you to reach out to us about. So please, please, please do. We are very eager to walk alongside of you as you practice writing for advocacy this summer. So with that, I am excited to hand it over to Grace, our comms expert, to share with you about how you can use social media this summer to do advocacy on behalf of God's creation. So, Grace.
Hello, everyone. thank you for joining. I'm gonna go ahead and make Tori the host real quick. Alrighty. Hi, everybody. Can everyone see the screen okay? Okay, perfect. Hello. I haven't gotten to talk to a lot of our EEN folks yet. So hello, I'm Grace. I am in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I am the communications director both for YCA and EEN. So I'll kind of speak into a little bit of those both. As we get started, I want to talk a little bit about why for this project, social media is important. I think that social media is either pretty intuitive to some people or rather terrifying for others, but it does have a large value add when we are publishing articles or even just doing action alerts and other advocacy situations like that. One of the biggest values of social media is that you are in your own little niche. So when you post on social media, you have a very unique set of people who are going to see that, different than if I posted it, much different than if EEN posted it, different than if ESPN or McDonald's posted it. And so there is a large value in having your own circle. So people, and that could be a college friend, your pastor, your uncle, your church friends, or even hobby friends like fellow runners or fellow bakers or scrapbookers or whoever it is. You have a very unique tap into each of these people when posting on social media. I want to talk a little bit about communications theory. And so I think it might help solidify why we want to post on social media. So Cialdini has a few principles of persuasion, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to persuade people to act on climate or on environment in this summer of action. And there are, I'm going to talk about the last four. So that's authority, commitment and consistency, liking, and social proof. And I think that social media lends itself really well to these four principles of persuasion. And I hope that it makes sense why we would want to be active on social media because of that. So the first is authority. And when you're posting on social media, we're often pulling content from other areas. So whether it is a news source, whether it is somewhere like EEN, where we have published a blog, whether it's a denomination, when an audience of a communication trusts and sees the poster or source as authoritative, they are much more likely to follow and to take action. So that's why it's really important to have reputable news sources. But then I'll also have the caveat that all sources are not created equal. And so we have to know our audience and our friends. So for example, if I posted something from Breitbart, I don't think a lot of my circle would really relate to that. So that's why we need to be posting neutral and reputable sources, but then also recognizing that as Christians, we have a very unique audience. So things like Christianity Today, your denominations page, and things like that can really have a large influence as well. The second principle that I'm going to talk about is commitment and consistency. And this is the principle that once people say they're going to do something, they are so much more likely to do it than not. And that's why we really like to have people pledge things publicly. So you'll think about like the beginning of a Girl Scouts, right? You come forward, you pledge that you are going to do this in front of people who know you, or even if you think about church membership. It is a really important principle to following through and taking action. And that's what you do when you post on social media. You say, this is something I care about, and people can expect that from you. And when we call others to also share that they've posted or that they've signed the petition, they have contacted their rep, it creates a great environment for others to take action as well. The third principle I want to talk about is liking. And so when you think about the diagram earlier and all the people you're friends with on social media, they like you. They're not going to be friends with you if they don't. It's rather easy and apparent on social media that you can unfriend people and you can distance yourself from who you want to. But typically your social network is going to be people who appreciate you. And that is one of the best ways to get someone to do something is if they already like you and you have a rapport. And so social media is a fantastic place to find those people who you already have a pre-existing relationship with, and you can ask to take action. The last one I'm going to talk about is social proof. And this is peer pressure. And social media is fantastic for peer pressure. And this is a responsible use of peer pressure. We're not asking people to do dangerous things, only helpful climate stewardship things. And liking and social proof go hand in hand. You have in your social networks people who are like you and who will do the things that you do because they trust you. If you are an elder in your church, if you are an expert runner and you're part of a running group, if you are on the school board and you have a lot of other parents who are your friends, that can go a really long way. Even if you think you don't have a huge influence, it's not as much about authority as having those relationships around you. And so social media is a great place to cultivate action among people who are just like you. I'm going to briefly talk about an example post to kind of break down what that looks like and why this is important. So this is a post that EEN made about methane. And this, the intention of this post was to drive people toward our action alert about the Methane Congressional Review Act and ask people to contact their senator. And so here you can see that it says the Senate took actually we were asking them to contact their representative. So it says the Senate took a crucial first step to #cut methane. Now it's time for the House to do the same. Take action, and it has the link. And you'll notice that there's the main portion of this, probably 80% of this post is a news article from the Washington Post about cutting methane emissions, and that has a large image of a methane well. And so this is important that one, you are posting it, not EEN. So automatically by that them seeing your photo and your name, there's gonna be some so they're going to recognize you and know that they like you and know that you're part of their social circle. With the #cut methane and this link, we ask, we kind of relate back to a greater campaign. So this might be something that people have seen already. And it is an ask that people will commit to and then hopefully post about. And hopefully this will be a first step for someone. And then also, this is from the Washington Post, and it's from experts, as you can see, from study finds. And so that's a great way to tie in the facts to this and to say, we're not just asking you to sign this petition to cut methane because we think it's a great way to spend our time, but it really will make a difference. Here's why. And then I also want to talk about why this works from a different point of view. When doing social media, it is very helpful to keep things short, especially on Twitter, but also on Facebook. And so that's what we've done here. We say what the situation is, and then we have a direct call to action, and it is actionable. So each one of these posts that we're going to be making are going to tie into some sort of action. In this campaign, we're not really looking to educate. We're looking to educate with the means or with the intention to later take action. And so we're going to always have a CTA there, a call to action. And then it's also visual. So scrolling across your timeline, it's not just a block of text. It's not a not pretty link. It has an image, and it might make people stop and think, why are we posting about methane wells here? Or what is that? Even if they don't know what a methane well is. The thing that this post does not do is it's not personal. This is coming from a nonprofit, an institution. And so we don't have the capacity to make it personal unless we recruit one of you, unless I take on my voice and post that way. But each of our posts should have the word I a lot in them, because people will see themselves in you, and there's levels of identity there too. And so when we're posting, we're going to tell our story in little bits and pieces, in order to make sure they're effective that way as well. So knowing why social media is important, knowing the different pieces of a social media post, what do we do to make this a campaign? How do we make this not just one-off posts that everyone is doing individually, but how do we unite and help each other here? I am going to have a weekly digest that has social media copy, hashtags, accounts to tag, links, news stories, and samples that you will then take and add your own stories to and post. So it's going to be very intuitive, very not scary. And we'll start with kind of making sure people understand why we're doing this. Because if people don't have an understanding of why this issue is important to you, they probably won't recognize why it's important. And so we need to make sure we're telling people. So this digest that I'm going to be sending out, Kyle is also going to have some information in, and he is going to be having some of his content. But one of the things that's great about this like weekly email that we're going to have together is that when you all are published, when we get those letters to the editors out, when we get those op-eds out, we are going to help each other by promoting them, and say, hey, Tori, my friend, who we're doing this thing together, she has this awesome story published and you all should read it. And you should also take action on this because it's so well written that I know you're going to be persuaded to act on this and to make sure that Congress includes climate infrastructure in their next package. And so that's really the point of what we're doing, is to get people to take action. And this is just a great medium to do that. And one of the most exciting parts is that this gives the opportunity for you to add your story to it. And in those emails, I'll give examples of something I might say, and you would probably say it much differently. We all are so unique and have our own unique circles, and you'll tie your own personal interests in that way. That's all I have about social media. So if anyone has questions, please drop them in the chat and let me know. I'm bad at monitoring the chat, so I'm going to pull that up.
No, that's okay. I mean, yeah, that's the right slide. And Grace, thank you so much. Kyle, thank you so much. You said that's all you had. If that's all you had, that would be more than enough. But we do have more. And so I want to leave this up on this slide for a second for those watching live or watching the recording later. For those of you live with us today, we're going to go ahead and drop this link in the chat box for you. We would love for you to take some time now, if you're live with us, take the next 30 seconds, click on the link from the chat box and let us know what you're interested in. Here's why. This is why. 3 things I need you to know. Your voice is important. Kyle talked about it. Grace talked about it. You are unique and special, and only you can reach the people that God has put in place for you to reach. You have your own people of peace, and they need to hear your story and your witness. And so we are here to help. That's the second thing we want you to know. Kyle had our emails there in the presentation, and we're going to continue to reiterate that please contact us. We are here to help you. And the third point is that this is something we want to sustain all summer, right? A lot of what we do here at EEN and at YCA is to help evangelicals and young evangelicals get a new perspective, maybe see the world a little bit differently, maybe more scripturally. And a lot of what we do in those spaces is call people to participate in activities and online things in their community. We really love that we're able to cultivate spaces for you to participate in with us. But this summer, especially, we really want to see you put this into practice in your day-to-day life. We really want to see you do that. So we can go ahead to the next slide. One of the ways we're going to do that over this summer season is have several things going on. We're through the middle of June already, but in July, we're going to be helping you hold lawmaker meetings. We're committed to helping place you with those meetings. If you want to have a meeting with your policymaker, let us know. We'll help you get that meeting. We'll help you prep for that meeting. And we may even have the opportunity to sit in with you. We're also going to help you pitch and place those op-eds and LTEs. I think I heard Kyle say that his dream summer is reading drafts of LTEs and op-eds. So I believe he said that somewhere. So please draft something, send it to him, email it to him. He would love nothing more than to sit down and nerd out and geek out with you about how that lead goes. So do that. And Grace she's committed. We want to help promote published pieces. So if you get something published, let us know so we can share from our platform so that we can get a wider audience and just affirm what God's doing and how he's used your voice to share this good news. And then towards the end of the summer, in August and September, we're going to come back with one more training opportunity. We're going to have someone come speak with us about congregational energy management and energy for missions. And so, again, this is all summer because the time is special. It is now. It's a special Kairos moment that's going on. But as you can see, hopefully, from Kyle and Grace today, not only is this timely, it's timeless. These tools that they're putting in our toolbox are tools that we can use in the fall and in the winter and in the spring and on all types of matters, not just creation care. So we really want to equip you to follow Jesus well in whatever context you're in and whatever our values are that we're sharing. And so I've just really appreciated your time and enjoyed your time. Grace, Kyle, thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for being with us live today if you joined. Thanks for watching this recording. We will be sending out all of the material to you by email, and I will personally be following up with you if you've registered and if we have your contact information, because it's that important to us. So with that, I'm going to give you the rest of your time. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat box now, or feel free to come off of mute. But otherwise, we're going to close this out. So I'll give us a moment or two. If you have anything you want to put in the chat box, you can do that now. All right. And with that, we'll just thank everyone for their time, and we look forward to hearing from you. You'll definitely be hearing from us as our summer of action continues. Thanks again for being with us today. Bye.